Lindsay Adler, thank you for joining us here at DPReview.
Thank you for having me.
And for people who don't know who you are, why don't you just explain a little bit about yourself?
I am a portrait and fashion photographer in New York City, and I'm also a photo educator. So my life is an exciting mix of those two things.
So you're in portrait, you're in fashion. I mean, what got you started?
So way back when, I actually picked up a camera, pre-teen even, but I picked up my first serious camera. It was a Canon Rebel 2000 when I was 13. And it was because my mom and my grandma were both hobbyist photographers, and I actually think it's kind of cool because it ran in the family. So I had, my mother was a hobbyist photographer, my grandmother was. My grandma said she remembered that my great-grandfather had a darkroom and things like that. So it started as a way to bond with family, and that's why I think right from the beginning it had a special place in my heart. But from there, when I was 13, I went on a family vacation, we went out west to the Grand Tetons, and I took a picture. And so I brought it back home, and someone says, "Oh, that's really good. You should enter it in this calendar company." And they bought it, and they paid $150 for it. And when you're 13, that is like making bank. Like I was like, I can live off of this. Mom and Dad, bye-bye. Not really, but that's why at 13 I was like, you know what? This could be my profession. Like if I can make $150 off of one photo, maybe I can do this. So I actually started my first photography business with the real paperwork, the real business at 15.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I've been in business 15 years. So that's my secret age, everybody.
That's fantastic. So, I mean, so at what point did that business become a viable business? What point did that become your profession?
So that's a good question, because when I started the business, my first package was 1 8x10, 2 5x7s, 8 wallets, I think for $59, including the session and retouching. Not actually a viable business, but I started by photographing my peers. So I was 15, 16, 17, 18, and I did high school senior portraits. So by the time I graduated, I was in the positives. I had a good income flow, and I was able to buy a lot of my own gear. And so what I did throughout college is I'd actually come back home in the summers, work and shoot senior portraits till my eyes bled, and that's how I could pay for a lot of my expenses in college.
So at what point did that become a viable business? Did it become a real revenue stream?
So when I first started my business, I just wanted business. So many people want to have their business be completely free. Well, I didn't do that, but I did have sessions. The first package was 1 8x10, 2 5x7s, 8 wallets, including retouching and the sitting fee, and the whole thing for $59, which thankfully I was shooting in my parents' living room, so I had minimal expenses, but that was not viable. So by the time I was graduating high school, so like 18, it was a viable business. I could buy my own gear. I was investing in education. And what I would do through college is I paid a lot of my expenses by coming back home, working the whole summer, basically till my eyes bled from shooting so much, as many as I could. And then that would be kind of what I'd live on for the rest of the year. So it's within maybe three years or so.
Wow. So was that mostly initially word of mouth?
Yeah, so I use marketing techniques I would not advise anyone to use now. I would go to like my fellow classmates and be like, yeah, the school photographer, like he's creepy and expensive. You should hire me. Like, don't do that, everybody. Like, don't do that. But it worked, because then they're like, oh, well, I'd rather have her just take it. It's cheaper. Not what I would do now for marketing, but it helped me get started.
You stole other people's. I
stole other people's business by calling them weird and old and expensive. So yeah, good start.
Well, if it worked.
It totally worked.
So this is 10, 12 years ago, and I'm trying to think back, but I know a big part of your business now, and a lot of what you teach people is marketing, especially using social media. Mm-hmm. Presumably that wasn't a feature of how you started out.
So this makes me laugh at feeling old, even though I'm not old, but Facebook didn't have photos back then. It wasn't even, I don't even know if people realize that. Like Facebook, that you had to be in college. It'd have a college email, and then for a while it didn't have the photo features the way it did. So originally, it was just word of mouth. But what ended up helping me is as soon as I saw Facebook open up, I exploited it to its full extent. And I remember there was the conversation of all these photographers, well, we don't want to give them any photos to put on Facebook And I was like, absolutely, here's my photos. You know, I'd find a way to get them to link to me. At that point, we'd be friends because that was the only way to do it. And it helped me massively because that's how people were seeing one another's photos. And so as soon as I would do a high school senior session at the beginning of the summer, I'd post the photo on Facebook, and then all the other people that hadn't done their sessions yet would come to me. So I just wasn't afraid of it, and I embraced it. But social media has become extremely, extremely important to my career and my success and my connections. And I can't even express all the ways. It's helping me get portrait referrals. It's even things like when people see my following, I'll get hired by certain brands because they want me to put the final result on and then push it to my following. So I'll even get things that I never even thought of. And my first book that I wrote was on social media marketing. And I was not tricky exactly, but what I did is I wanted...
You told everyone that all the other books on social media marketing were old.
Yeah, and said, no, me. Yeah, they're old, they're creepy, they're weird, don't get these other books. No, I saw that people just started to get on Twitter. Like Twitter was new, and people just started doing that. And then I saw Facebook. So what I did is I went and I called up all the photographers that I saw that were really making a splash in social media. And I interviewed them, and I wrote a book on how to use social media for your business, and then I just did what they did.
Right.
I had no social media following whatsoever. I remember when people first were looking at this book, I had like 500 Twitter followers. So like, why would I read a book by you? And I'm like, watch, you know? And then it worked out.
So if someone wants to do this now, what just really quickly, is there any best practice that a photographer should be aware of now?
Totally.
Around social media?
Well, I think it's a best practice for all marketing. It's knowing your audience. Really, don't just throw a message out there. You have to figure out what your message is. So what do you want to say about your business? Who do you want to say it to, specifically where your audience, or who your audience is, and then where can you find them online? And then once you get there, so what do I want to say, who do I want to say it to, where can I find them, and then how the heck do I get through all this noise? What can I do to get their attention? And a lot of times it's having an engaging conversation, starting a conversation. I know you guys know all about these things. And it's becoming part of the community that your audience is involved in, beyond just an outsider talking at, it's joining the conversation.
So how do you manage the transition between the virtual space and actually, presumably physically meeting people and actually, being in groups is important as well. And how do you manage that transition?
So there are many different ways to approach this. I know that some groups are going to be virtual groups at their core. And when I travel and teach photography, it's awesome because I get to meet some of these people and put, a face and a name together. I think part of what I do is I always stay professional online, but I always stay me. And I think that makes the transition easier because if you have all these different personas you're balancing, then you have to be different people in different spaces. And then also, if you're professional online solely, nobody wants to connect with a business. They want to connect with a person. So I try to be me. I try to let people take a look at my personality and my passions. And then when I meet them, it's almost like continuing a conversation, not starting it. And I try not to just talk at. I really try to talk to online. And then when I meet somebody, it's beyond that. And it works for photo teaching, like education, but all the time for portraits and other clients.
It sounds like, from my limited experience of using social media for work, this sounds to me like a full-time job.
Yeah, so a lot of what I do is I'm the person who shares the message, the photos or what's going on in my life, and then I have an employee who handles things like, not questions like, oh, what gear do I use, but questions like, oh, Lindsay, when are you speaking next?
Right. Okay.
The questions that can be easily pointed someplace else. It could be a full-time job, and my recommendation for people is I would try to devote like an hour a day, 1 hour. If it's more than that, there's probably other marketing and things in your business you could do. If it's less than that, you're probably not really focusing on it. So like a solid hour that's not commenting on random Facebook photos because you're bored or like just liking an Instagram, but like dedicated to marketing for your business.
Right, engaging actively.
Exactly, and thinking about those questions. What do you want to say? Like actually reflecting on it instead of, here I'm just going to post something and hope. And I still will post things just because I want to, But I know when I'm going to post something that's going to start a conversation from experience. You pick it up. You know what your audience engages with after a lot of practice, like anything.
So let's go back a little bit. I mean, at some points, if you started 10, 12 years ago, sort of in earnest, at some point you must have had the transition to digital.
Yep.
So what was your first sort of dip into that new arena?
Okay, so what was my very first one? Okay, now we have the 5D. Wasn't there's even like a D5. What was the very first Canon one? There was a 10, there was a 20,
There's
but
a
before
10.
the 10 and 20.
Oh, well, there was the D30 and D60.
30.
D30.
30D?
Yeah.
D30.
D30.
D30. So that was the first one. And what I did in the beginning.
That was about 2000, I think, 99 to 2000.
Yep. And that was just about when I was getting into starting business, like it kind of getting off the floor with the business there. I shot both with my Rebel 2000, and then I shot with digital. But the needs for high school senior portraits, I don't want to say they're very low, but they were, for my audience, the biggest people ever got was 16 by 20s.
Right.
And so I could get away with it a lot. So my transition was actually pretty easy. And because I was young, I wasn't averse to technology and changing things. So it was almost instant. But looking back now at however many megapixels, it was 6 or
It was
something.
3.
3?
Yeah.
No. Well, now I have my 50.6 megapixel Canon 5DS, whatever. Yeah.
But isn't it amazing how good 3 still is if you only want to make a letter-sized
Well, they
print?
just put out with the iPhone 6S or whatever that it's 12 megapixels and it's 4K video. What?
Yeah.
These things were not even conceivable a couple years ago. I love that.
So let's run with that a little bit. I mean, now one of the problems a lot of photographers that I speak to, we speak to, face is the saturation of the market now with people who have equipment which would have been out of people's range a few years ago. And some of it is just smartphones because they're so much more capable now. Everyone's taking pictures now. A lot of photographers finding it quite hard to actually differentiate and try and stress the value of their own work. And how do you stand out now that everyone is a photographer?
Totally, and I think that fear and that difficulty, like the struggle is real. Like this is it really is. I don't downplay how difficult it is to stand out. So what I do is I don't sell a product, I sell an experience. So if somebody hires me for a portrait, you have to get your hair done and your makeup done. We have to have some kind of consultation. We are going to have some kind of theme, and we're going to build inspiration board. And on the day of, you're going to feel like $1 million. So they're buying the entire experience, not just like pretty photos at the end. So that's one of the things that I do is figuring out that it's the experience and the interaction and the relationship. People are much more likely to make, if they're really interested in investing money, not just, okay, I need a picture. They really want a portrait. They're likely going to pick the person that they feel connected with, who they think are going to make them feel relaxed and that want the best photo for them, not just selling them. So that's definitely part of it.
So can you talk us through, so someone comes to you and says, Lindsay, I want a picture.
Yep.
And can you talk us through the process of what happens from that initial contact through to the eventual end result?
Yeah. So it starts off by usually an email. And somebody says, I'm interested in hiring you. And I say, great. What vision do you have? What is it that you would want out of a portrait session with Lindsay Adler? What is it that you hired me for? Because they could go anywhere. So I want to know right away what are they interested in. And I do generally try to get people on the phone. And that's a tip that I recommend because it is so easy if people are talking on email just to goodbye, just forget about you. But a phone connection, you're a real person now. They spoke to you. And so what we do is we discuss and we build a mood board. And a mood board is a collection of images based on a theme that summarizes the goals, the visual goals of the shoot. And so I usually have them build a Pinterest board. And I don't ask them to give me 1 or 2 images. I ask for like 15 or 20. Because 1 or 2, they're going to ask me to recreate. 15 or 20, I'm going to discern from those what they like visually. And so we look at their inspiration, and then I go ahead and I figure out, okay, what kind of hair do they need? What kind of makeup do they need? Are we going to be on location? What are these images going to look like? Do we need special clothing, or are they going to send pictures of their clothing and I'll consult them? And then usually I don't just do a headshot where you come in and out. My shoots are almost always at least a half-day shoot, but usually a full-day shoot. So it's going to be 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. It's going to be a full experience. And so they'll come in for a shoot, and it's usually an hour and a half to 2 hours on makeup. This is for a woman. Guys, obviously a little shorter. And then I'll have full wardrobe there usually, so they can pick out the dresses or the clothing they want, try it on, figure out what looks they want. And then we'll shoot. And I usually shoot tethered so that the images are coming up and we can pick out what they like and I can get a feel for it. And then from there, typically most of my clients don't live in New York, so they go, so I don't usually do the image consultation in person because it's not possible. So I usually give them a photo shelter gallery for them to pick from. And I give them my advice on the images that I think are strongest. And then most of the time, the people that are hiring me, they're actually buying the digital files, but I'm selling the prints as a value added.
Right, okay.
So that's from start to finish.
So how much of the, I mean, a lot of, I've seen your work and it's wonderful. I can't tell how much of it is purely in camera versus sort of polished up and finished in post. I mean, how much post-processing do you do? How long does that take?
It's funny, because it's such a drastic difference from image to image. I posted a photo a couple weeks ago of a girl she was absolutely beautiful, but the lighting that I wanted to use was really harsh. It was really like a tight grid and a little bit of fill. In the raw picture, her skin looked bad. I felt bad for her. I posted the before and after, so I'm like, I hope she didn't look. Yeah, so sometimes it's a ton, and sometimes it's nothing at all, a little bit of contrast. But in general, almost always, I know what it's going to be before I shoot the picture, or as I'm shooting the picture, because typically there's two types of Photoshop for me. My creative Photoshop, where it's part of my vision. I know that I'm going to take this piece of fabric and turn it into smoke that melts away.
Right, okay, so you're adding elements that weren't there in the studio.
It's part of the concept. Or it's their skin retouching. I don't even consider them the same. They intersect, but they're two drastically different things. And in general, I will spend, let's say maybe an hour on an image. If it's more, I outsource it.
Right.
At this point in my career, if you asked me 2 years ago, I was doing everything, but now I put it this way, I'm busy enough that I can outsource those things. So
do you have people that you trust that you use a lot?
Yeah, because I train them up so they know what I want. So what I did in the beginning is I would take an image and I would send them the raw, and I'd ask them to retouch it. And then I would send them my version once I saw what they came up with. And either if I liked theirs better, they're already in. Okay, sweet, that was good. Or I would say, okay, now take a look at these two. What can you do to move it in the direction of mine? So I think it's important to know what's possible as well, because the more you know, the more you can direct. But it doesn't mean you always have to do it by hand. I know what I want out of makeup on a shoot, but that doesn't mean I need to do it. I can direct my vision. So I don't think it's cheating to have an amazing retoucher. It's a director on a film production. They're not doing everything, but it's their vision. It's still their product in the end.
Yeah, I was talking the other day on a panel that a lot of photographers, successful film photographers, never developed or printed their own work. They expect it's a fairly new expectation that anyone would now in the realm of digital. If you in looking back, you've come a long way since doing senior portraits, aged 18 or whatever. Is there anything that you wish that you know now that you wish you'd known when you were starting out?
Yeah, well, it's not even known, but something I wish I would have embraced a little bit more. Getting rejected sucks. It super sucks. And I took it too personally. I still do. Okay, it doesn't go away. So if somebody didn't want to work for me or work with me, or if I didn't get a job, or if someone didn't want to publish me, I always thought that meant that I wasn't good enough. I always thought that it meant it was something with me. And now I realize that's totally not the case. It's your style might not have been a right fit, or the budget might not have been a right fit, or maybe the personality just wasn't a right fit. But I wish I would have realized that getting rejected doesn't always mean it's on me, and that I would have put myself out there more. And I still say this aloud all the time because I still do it all the time. There are opportunities I know I miss because I don't want to hear that no. And so I'm still training myself up to get over that. And I don't think I'm alone in that.
Yeah.
It sucks.
So how much do you pitch for work these days versus people coming to you?
It's a mix. I do get people coming to me now, which feels awesome, but that's probably only in the last 2 years, where I get more coming directly to me. I pitch all the time, and I get rejected all the time, like all the time. But I'm also now, I pitch for the bigger jobs, and if I just get a couple, I'm golden. Whereas I get a lot of the base jobs, you know, that they pay my rate, but that's about it. I get those come to me all the time, so that's great because I have them priced to pay the bills, and I have the other jobs priced to buy a house. Eventually, I'm working on that in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I was speaking to Sue Bryce, and she was saying exactly the same thing.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, awesome.
So, at this point in your career, what are you proudest of?
I have lots of things that I'm proud of. At the core, the very base of it is, I live in New York City. I'm a working photographer with my own studio. I think that's pretty awesome. Like I know a lot of people that dream to move to New York and have it, and that doesn't happen. So I'm most proud of that at the core, and even if it was nothing more than that, I'd still be proud. But I just became a Canon Explorer of Light, and that was something that when I first started teaching, that was a goal, and I would say that's probably the longest running goal I've ever had. You know, like I was thinking, what other goals have I had that I've worked for such a long time? And that's probably been the longest. So that one, and then I've got 4 books. If anyone's ever written a book, you know how much of accomplishment it is to just do 1. So 4, I'm like, yeah, I'm good.
So let's, before we end, I want to just quickly get some information and advice from you for people who might want to start taking better portraits, maybe starting out trying to do what you do. I mean, what are the sort of really simple do's and don'ts for people who just want to get better portraits of a friend or a loved one?
So some things I see that are common mistakes. I see a lot of people shoot really wide frames of portraits. They shoot kind of like midsection. And I say get closer. Like the portraits that a lot of times really touch you and engage you are really tight headshots that focus on the expression and the connection with camera. It's not about the other stuff, it's about the person, so getting closer. And then I see a lot of people like we are right now, like sitting back in chairs. Don't sit your subject back in a chair because they pull their chin in and they have a nice double chin and a short neck and they look all crazy. So I always have people lean forward and I'm cropping in tighter, trying to get the expression more than anything else. That's like the very first things that I wish I would have done a little bit better when I was first doing portraits. I got a lot of midsection sitting back over.
So how do you manage the connection with people? How do you make them feel? I was talking to Peter Hurley about this, and he was saying the biggest challenge for him actually is often just psychological, just people sitting down and just freezing up and tensing up. I mean, how do you get people to sort of relax and make that connection with you?
Part of my take is I try to figure out what someone is passionate about, whatever that is. Everybody loves something, their dog, a sports team, a memory, whatever it is, their kids. And I try to get them talking about that passion underneath the lights in front of the camera as I'm just testing. Don't even worry, I'm clicking and I'm just kind of like fixing lights. But really what I'm trying to get them to do is open up emotionally once they're already in front of the camera. So then that next step to getting their picture taken is a little bit smoother. And there's something, so Peter and I are friends, and I saw him speak a couple times, and one of the things that he mentions that I absolutely do is the chameleon thing. Did he mention that to you?
He may have done.
It's adapting your personality.
Not using those words.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he did.
Adapting your personality, because I know that sometimes on a shoot, I will have a model that I need to know what to give her, or on a portrait, I need to know what to give that person, because maybe she's feeling standoffish that day, and I need to try to crack that shell and just have a conversation. Or maybe I'm a little bit too loud and this person's like, holy crap, this woman is way too much for me right now, so I need to tone it down so I don't feel intimidated. So yeah, I'll totally change, but then I'll turn around to my wardrobe stylist and be loud to her because she can handle loud. So I just kind of, if you watch me, I'm like around the whole space. It's very amusing. I adapt my personality as necessary.
So if someone's looking to get into portraiture, they don't want to, I think a lot of people think they have to spend a lot of money on really amazing gear to take good pictures, which is, as we know, is a myth.
Sure.
I mean, what can you get away with? What's your sort of basic go-to equipment to shoot portraits? My
current go-to equipment, or if I were even saying if I were going to be super low budget right now, I shoot with a Canon 5D Mark III most of the time. You'd be fine with a crop sensor or something like that. I don't even think nowadays with the quality of cameras that are out there that it really even matters that much. As long as it's got decent quality and it's like enough focus points. They almost all do at this point. So what I shoot is a 5D Mark III, and the lens that I would recommend would be a Canon 85-1.8. It's inexpensive, awesome portrait lens. I shoot with the 85-1.2, but it's a couple thousand more. So it wouldn't necessarily go that way. And you just need one light with a softbox. If you watch behind the scenes of Vanity Fair shoots where they'll have like the president, he just got shot by Mark Seliger out in Alaska, and it's like a giant umbrella with diffusion close up on location. Now it's a studio strobe, but there's lots of brands. So I think it's amazing. I think a lot of what we think is incredible when we look at photography is super simple.
Very simple, yeah.
Very, very simple, just well executed. Great concept, good connection. So I think the biggest thing is just don't let the gear frighten you. Keep it simple.
Great, well thank you so much. It's been really fun talking to you. Thank you, Lindsay.
Absolutely, thanks for having me.